chapter are we on?
8.
8?
On Chapter 8. So we will today be discussing client interviews. We've got some helpful videos to go through to help us build our skills. And can everybody see my screen? I'm about to share it now with the PowerPoint. Can you see it okay?
I see it great.
Awesome. So we will go ahead and jump right into it. This is a really important chapter, everybody. This is beginning that foundation for your community health worker interviewing. Many of you might already do interviews to an extent at your organization, and this is just taking it into a little deeper processing, having a formal way about approaching clients, and then there's some great videos we'll review at the end to just cement everything that you guys learned. So, so an overview of client interviews. Why interview, you might ask? To assess a client's eligibility for various services provided by a particular agency or program. You might know why you're interviewing that individual when they come into your office. You might not be sure, so it's good to be prepared either way. You're most likely in your initial interview going to be completing an initial assessment of clients' resources needed, risks, and priority concerns. You will need to obtain informed consent for participation in a research study. If you are working on a special project at your organization and collecting data, it's good to let your client know. Before we go any further, I would like to talk to you about our confidentiality agreement, let you know that we are conducting research. Your questions will be held confidential, but will be used for the purposes of research. That sort of skit would be a good example of client interviewing for research study. So some primary goals for conducting client interviews: we want to welcome the client, make them feel comfortable. We want to build a positive initial connection, which could include, looking at them in the eye, letting them know that you value what they have to say, you feel it's important, and you are sitting side by side versus across from them as often as possible, so that they can feel more like you're in a partnership versus them being talked at. You want to interview your client to determine eligibility for services, for needs. Like we said, explain confidentiality and obtain informed consent. How many of you, by a show of hands, guys, have an informed consent form already that you're using when you meet with clients? You can just raise your hand. Okay, so looks like a few of us, about 4 folks raised their hand and says they have an informed consent form. Lorna, great. So if you don't have an informed consent form, you might want to ask your organization, start there first, and determine if they do have an informed consent form for you guys to use. If not, we can definitely work on making one available to you, and we might already have something that's created that you can edit and make your own really easily with customization. So thanks, guys, who participated. I'm just going to put your hands down so that we'll know next time when hands are raised. So you also will want to assess clients' risk factors, barriers, internal and external resources that promote health. You want to listen and respond to the client's questions and concerns. And then you want to provide guidance and support to the client about next steps and then you want to conclude your interview. So these are the primary goals highlighted in your chapter, and I'm just going over these again so that you guys can, you know, get this once more. So there's a structure to successful interviewing. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. So in the beginning, you want to welcome your client, explain why you're there, obtain consent, and build that initial rapport with them, letting them know they're in a non-judgment zone, that you're there as an advocate to help them. Let them know that, you know, you might be referring them to additional help if it's outside of your realm of expertise, but that you're glad to meet with them initially and determine their needs, and then connect them with the proper individual from there. Then once you're past that welcoming and obtaining consent stuff, you want to go ahead and begin to gather information about the client's needs and concerns. And this might be in the form of an intake form. Folks, another show of hands, do any of you guys have client intake forms that you use there at your community health centers or organizations? And you can comment in the chat box too. Esther says yes, she has a client intake form. Kelly, Marty, Karen, Kelly, Cherry. If you guys don't have a client intake form, there's a great example on Litmos in Chapter 8, Additional Resources. I believe it's 8.3. There is a great document there that you can use and make your own. And basically it asks basic questions. Would it be helpful, guys, if I pulled that form up just to show you what it looks like? Or do you already have it? Okay, let me go ahead and pull that up for us really quick. Sorry about all the screen movement. Just bear with me for 1 minute, and I'll get us to that great document that's uploaded. So you want to go to Additional References, and it's actually Activity 8.6, Intake Form. And so this is an example. It's a sample. But you can see it has basic information like date, client name, address, best contact, date of birth, gender, ethnicity, family status, employment, income information, whether they have health insurance. This is a really great document because it's like covering all the bases. And you can fill this out as you're speaking to your client, or you can ask them to fill it out too. It's your preference. But it also goes into previously diagnosed health conditions, medications, and other treatments that you might need to know about. A primary health concern, this will help you gauge why they're there meeting with you. Any health goals, there's also health action plan, and then follow-up as needed about when you guys should meet again, any external resources, health risk factors. So this is a great document, and I would say that if you guys don't have this already, we can certainly work here at the PCA to build you out a sample form to use, but you could also build one in Excel and really make it customized. So this is a pretty generic form. You can make it your own, and if you need any assistance with that, please let me know. And then Esther, did you have a question? Or maybe folks, you were just raising your hand to show that you do have client intake forms. These are very helpful. And then you know what you can do? You can archive this later, and then when you're about to meet with your client again, you can refresh your memory as to what we met about last time, what our goals were, who did I refer them to, and so this will help you keep up with all your clients and not get them all mixed up, because it can be tough when you're meeting with a lot of people to keep everyone's story straight, to know why they came to you initially, what you guys did. So this is a good documentation system as well. So I'm going to, okay, Kelly says we should have a group email if one of us needs help later on. Yes, so thank you, Kelly, for mentioning that. We do have a listserv that we just launched here at the PCA, and it's broken apart by apprenticeship types. And actually tomorrow, Kelly, we will be emailing all apprentices about their listserv. And this will be an opportunity for us to communicate with each other on a regular basis, stay in touch, go over any questions that we might have. I'll send an introductory email letting you guys know how the listserv works. We can share documents there, and also share many resources as a community health worker group. So be looking out for that email to hit your box tomorrow. We just got done inputting everybody's stuff into the listserv, and it should be a really great resource for us to all share information with each other and just stay current on things. So thanks, Kelly, and you are welcome. So we'll head into more about the successful interview style. So we talked about gathering information about the client's needs and concerns, which is huge, and that can be done through an intake form or just through note-taking in general, which you'll probably want to make a good practice of if you haven't already. And then at the end of the interview, you want to be able to determine enrollment or participation in available programs, provide referrals, and identify next steps. So there should always be a conclusion when you're done meeting with clients, so that they have closure and they know, we met today, we discussed this. If we didn't get through everything today, we will need to meet again, and here's when. So if you don't have business cards, I highly encourage you to get them. Even better, if you are putting in an order for additional business cards when you become a certified community health worker, it would be great if on the back of your cards is just a little tidbit to put appointment, date, and time and location, just so that your clients can have your card on hand, and then when they flip it over, they'll also know when to meet you again. So it might be an expense somewhat to your organization, but it will be great for follow-up purposes in that end step where you can hand them a card and remind them, okay, so your appointment is on this day at this time, and I'll see you again then. And if you should need to cancel or reschedule, my phone number is on the opposite side of the card. So that's just a little tidbit about that. So how do we build a good connection with our clients? Our ability to create and maintain a positive, trusting relationship with our clients is huge. People want to feel like they trust you when they're talking to you. They want to feel like they're telling someone a story that matters. So it's important for you to build trust with your clients, to have your own sense of personal style, make eye contact, smile, have a sense of humor. Of course, if someone's having a crisis and they're very upset and emotional, it probably isn't a good time to have a sense of humor or maybe even smile. So you'll just have to gauge, personally, when's the best time to insert these things. You'll know when the time is right. So build on your experience and be true to your own experience, values, and personality while still respecting your client's beliefs and culture. You need to be grounded in who you are. You need to be confident in who you are. But you also need to know that who you are at that moment doesn't really matter. What matters is your patient that's in front of you, what they're coming to see you about, what their needs are, and their future planning is the purpose of your meeting, not to talk about your personal experiences and give advice. We really want to stay away from giving advice to people because it can backfire big time. So that's just a caution. And then we want to treat all clients with respect and dignity. You may not see eye to eye with someone. You might not want to befriend them or even share a cup of coffee with them in your off time, but you want to make them feel respected and dignified. So there's a little thing that says we are all longing for community, connection, acceptance, and love. And that's true. We all want to feel like we're accepted and we're loved, and we want to feel a part of something bigger. So your work as a community health worker oftentimes will be to bridge the gap between patients and needs that they have, and maybe they haven't been met or they're off track and they need some redirection. So you want to be strong in your demeanor while being respectful and giving your clients dignity and building trust with them. So a little bit about the interview space. It might not always be a traditional office. You might be meeting clients in their home. You might be meeting clients in other community settings like a library or another organization. So just try to make sure the space is comfortable and inviting. And when you can, sit next to the individual that you're with at that time. Try not to sit behind a desk so that they feel, we don't want them to feel intimidated or interrogated. So you want to sit next to them. If you're in your office, you want to make sure the space is comfortable and inviting. I don't know if you guys believe in feng shui. I'm not promoting it, but just do what you can to make that environment peaceful. You don't know what your client could be dealing with or what kind of news they could have been dealt when they come to meet with you, and it's just good to go into a nice place, maybe have a jar of candy, be child-friendly, have books and games and coloring books for kids so that they don't feel like they're bothering you and that having their child there is a hardship on you, because maybe it's a hardship on them, and that's the only way they could make the appointment work. So be open to children being at your appointments and be child-friendly as much as possible. You want to do your best to have your forms handy, including client intake form, referral lists, and other items deemed appropriate. Before your client comes in, try to prepare for the day. Look at your schedule, know who you're meeting, and be prepared for them, because the last thing we want to do, if our time is very precious, and I assume your time is very precious in your organization, you want to be sure that your time is spent wisely and that people aren't waiting on you to make 1 million copies and waiting for a coworker and then the printer's broken. So just do your best to plan ahead for clients that are coming and have things really handy for them. And once again, we talked about having the business cards with a follow-up appointment if possible. If you can't get new business cards, fine. Maybe do a print-off where it says your name, the location, and then it tells you, it tells your client when they can expect to meet with you again. So you can create an old-fashioned one in Word if you can't get cards that have appointment details. So some tips for successful client interactions. We want to be aware of body language. We want to demonstrate that we're concerned. We want to be culturally competent. If we don't speak their language and they don't speak our language, we want to connect with someone in the community that might be a translator, that they feel comfortable having translate or having access to the language line. We want to respect our client's privacy. You might know things about the client because you've been briefed, and then you notice they're not really telling the full story. You have to be really careful about how you draw out information from your clients while still being respectful You might know things they're not telling you. Maybe they're ashamed, maybe they don't feel it's any of your business, and maybe it's not your business. But you want to be aware that this is their life and they have a right to privacy, so they might just share bits and pieces with you. We want to be aware of the time. And if you are meeting with a client, and we'll see this in some of the videos we're going to watch today, but if you're coming up short on time and you notice you have 10 minutes left and another client coming, it would be best to acknowledge your time constraint and say, you know, Beth, we have about 10 minutes left today. I really feel like we made some great progress, and I'd like to keep the momentum going, but I've got another appointment starting very quickly after we're done meeting here, and I would love to take these last few minutes to wrap up our conversation and then schedule the next time we'll meet together. So do you have an idea of when you would like to meet, when your schedule allows? And so that's a great transition, and letting them know that you're aware of your time, but you're also being respectful of theirs. And if you have additional time, great, but if you don't, just let them know and they'll understand. You want to summarize what you've heard. So when someone tells you something very private about themselves, or they're going through the motions of telling you their story, you want to repeat things back. Okay, so just so I understand correctly, you are doing X, Y, and Z, or you have been to see this specialist, but you need help with Medicaid to pay for another specialist. Is that correct? So summarize what they're telling you they need, because sometimes when people say things and we hear things, there can be disconnections. So we want to just do our best to confirm that and let people know that we are listening. Be sure to ask your clients if they have questions or concerns, and then listen. Say, do you have any, it's been great meeting with you today. Did you have any questions or concerns about our session today or our meeting? Pause. Give them an opportunity to digest your question and then respond. You also want to pace yourself. This goes into us being aware of our time. You don't want to rush through something, because impressions are everything. And if people feel like they're just another person on your list and you're super busy and you don't even have the time, that's just not professional. You know, it's not a good way to conduct business. We want everybody to feel like their time with us is important and their time is valuable, just as valuable as ours. So pace yourself and take your time. We want to thank our client for their time. When you're finishing up an appointment, it's very important to acknowledge that they made an effort to be there and thank them for that effort. That's empowering. That's saying to you, you matter, I value your time today, you're important, and I would like to set up another meeting with you. And that will increase the likelihood of them agreeing to meet with you again. If it's a circumstance where you'll never see them again and you did your part, you're referring them to women, infants, and children, they're going to go get some flu shots, that's great. You can just thank them for their time and tell them if they should need anything else to reach out anytime, and or if you know anyone in the community, family or friend that would like help, let them know I'm here and I'm a resource. So you want to thank your client for your time. And then also, you want to set up a follow-up appointment as needed. So we're going to take the last maybe 15, 20 minutes to review a couple of videos. But before I jump into the videos, I just want to pause and ask you guys if you have any questions or concerns. Are you guys already doing client interviewing? If you could just do a show of hands or speak freely, everyone's off mute. Is anyone else doing client interviewing in your current role? Marty, I'm not sure if you can talk, but if anyone who's raised their hand could describe what you're doing in your interviews, that would be great. If you could talk, that would be great. I'd love to hear about your interviews and what kind of people you're protecting PII, of course, but what kind of people are you interviewing?
This is Marty. Most of mine are just for the services, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. I have a few that I'm doing some intake with behavioral health or just getting help. So I have to, sometimes I really feel bad because I have to ask them a gazillion questions and personal questions, and I just try to make them feel as comfortable as I can while we're, going through the processes. And I've had, good outcome. I've not had anybody get upset. I had one because of the Social Security number, which was very odd, but they just didn't feel comfortable. By the end of the session, though, they were very comfortable, and it was a hurdle we got over, but it was just kind of odd at the moment how it just stopped everything. It's like, no. And that was the end of the we just said no. But that's kind of what I do. Mostly mine's for Medicare, Medicaid, ADRC, and I have them as a great resource, so I'm getting a lot of input from them while we're interviewing clients here. So that's my experience.
Nice. Thanks, Marty. And you bring out a good point about how interviewing can get awkward at times. And when you are asking these personal questions and things like that, people can feel threatened, and you don't mean to come off this way. You're not trying to threaten them in any way, but people are protective over their information. So, yes, pre-authorization forms are huge. And then in the Litmos training, it talks about HIPAA and being HIPAA compliant. So please be sure to check that out in Chapter 8. I'm going to just take a second and check the chat box. Suryani says, same here. We do OB intake and interview for Medicaid, Medicare. Karen Johnson says, pre-authorization is to identify concerns and triage to level 1, 2, or 3. Client intake is to discover barriers to completing daily living tasks and goals for increasing skills. Alaska screening tool and client status reports are to check the review and status progress. Well, thank you very much for that, Karen. If you can share some of that, those resources on our listserv, that would be great. I'd love to help the others in today's course sharpen their skills there with that kind of stuff. So thank you, guys. Anyone else want to share information about their client interviewing process that you have in place?
Sherry?
Yes?
This is Kelly. We just recently started to do, most of the time we do Athabascan Gwich'ins. So we're taking out a bilingual that speaks fluent Gwich'in to talk with the elders, so they could be more comfortable answering questions with us. And we recently started working with PCC, who has a list of other languages like Latino and stuff like that. But it's mostly Gwich'ins that we deal with, so we take her on our site visits to the villages.
And then what are you screening for typically, Kelly?
Everything, Medicaid, Medicare, registration, sliding scale fee, elderly applications, all of the above.
Nice.
We try to get it all one shot.
And do you have a client intake form?
Oh yeah, we have one that we screen every 6 months with each patient, and most of the time we see them one-on-one, but sometimes we call them at their home and do it over the phone. It's very brief, and then if we need to ask questions, then we ask them to come in and to fill out some forms if we need more information.
And do you guys help with renewals, like for Medicaid or whatnot?
Yes, we do. We have a list of Medicaid when they're going to be expiring, so we try to reach them before it expires, and we have the renewal forms, everything. So it's working with 1,200 people is sort of a plus because it's so little and we all know each other. So when I go to the village, I know everybody. It's amazing.
And having that documentation system helps you remember everything about everybody and keep it in a safe, secure place.
Yeah. And then I try to help them by filling it out as best as I can because most villages all have the same, the village and all the in certain areas that's similar. So we try to fill those out and make copies and take that with us to the village.
Awesome. Well, if you don't mind, Kelly, if you could shoot me an email with your intake form, I'd love to collect those. Anyone that's on today's call, if you could help me out by sending your intake forms over, I can try to just go over all of them and incorporate into one bigger one that we could all use in the future. Really appreciate that, guys, if you could share those resources with me from your org. Well, thanks, everybody, for your participation with letting me know how your client intake works at your org. And if you need help with that or need to do the HIPAA thing to just learn more about confidentiality, which I'm pretty sure you guys already know, just be sure to check out Chapter 8 on Litmos additional resources. So I'm going to go ahead and put everybody on mute just to cut down on background noise. We're going to watch a couple videos, and then we will wrap up today's session. So our first video is called Client Intake Interview Example. So I'll just go ahead and launch that first one.
Hello, my name is Dr. Zelina. I will be your case manager today doing your interview. First, we're going to start with the important consent form. If you just want to go on and read through and sign at the end, it's just a confidentiality form, just to know that whatever we say here is going to stay here at the agency. Go ahead. During this interview, I will be taking notes. Is that okay with you, Mr. Solis?
No, it's fine.
Okay. If at any time during this interview you feel the need to stop me and ask me a question, go ahead and do so. If you do not understand if I speak correctly or clearly, go ahead and stop me. What is your disability, Mr. Solis?
I suffer from short-term memory loss.
Okay. What caused your disability?
A car crash and severe head injury.
Okay. How long have you had your disability?
5 years.
Okay. When were you diagnosed with your disability?
4 years ago.
Okay. Any changes since the time of your disability, sir?
Yes, my sleeping habits have changed severely. I suffer from fatigueness and restlessness.
Okay. Any treatment for your disability, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Did those treatments not work successfully or?
Not successful.
Okay. How has your disability affected your daily life functioning?
I cannot go places by myself when.
You have to depend on somebody else.
Yes,
Sure.
yes,
Okay. Any medications that you take for your disability?
yes, sir.
Okay. Are they for your disability or for others?
For my disability.
Okay. Are you currently employed, Mr. Solis?
No.
Okay. How is your social life right now?
Good.
You go out and you enjoy your time out?
Not by myself, but yes, I do.
Okay. How about your social life before your disability and after? Is it better now or what?
I need to have somebody with me for my disability.
Oh, okay. So you can't just go enjoy your night by yourself?
No.
Okay. What about your marital status?
Single.
You're you live with your family?
My daughter.
You live with your daughter. So you have one child.
Yeah.
Okay. And you are seeking treatment, and who is pushing you to seek treatment? Who do you have support from?
My daughter.
Your daughter. Okay, your daughter. Your daughter wants you to get help to better your disability, correct? Okay. How do you feel about your home environment?
Safe?
You feel safe? You don't feel endangered?
No.
Okay. How far is your education?
I graduated.
You graduated high school? Okay. Do you have any degrees in college?
No.
Okay. Do you have an insurance provider currently?
Yes.
Okay. So if your treatment qualifies, if you qualify for treatment, your insurance provider will pay for the services.
Right. Correct.
Okay. How are you financially, economic? How is your situation?
Good.
Okay. Good. Your sources of income?
The government helps me and my daughter financially.
Okay, you get a check for your disability, correct?
Correct.
Do you own your own vehicle?
No.
You don't own your vehicle. Okay, the reason I asked for that question is because we do provide transportation to and from your appointments if it's needed at any time, okay? Just so you know that option is there for you. Okay, that is all I have for you today, Mr. Sunny. If you feel you have any questions for me, at the front desk, they will give you my card as you walk out. If you have to get back to me, if you feel you forgot to mention something to me, go ahead and give me a call back, and I'll set you up an appointment, and we can meet again. Thank you, Mr. Sunny.
Thank you.
Okay, great. We will go on to the next video. Just a little deeper dive about confidentiality and how to talk about that.
So, Lucetta, before we talk any further about sort of what brings you in today and what's going on with your health, I want to back up for a second and just review our confidentiality policy, if that's okay.
Okay.
So I know that you signed the HIPAA form out in the waiting room, and you've probably signed that in other places. And that's about a federal law that requires us and all healthcare providers to protect your privacy and the privacy of your information. So it is illegal for us to share information about you or your health condition with anyone outside of our immediate clinical team without your written permission. So if, for example, you were working with another provider in the community and you wanted us to talk with them, we couldn't do that until we had both signed a release of information at your request, and that would tell us what exactly we could talk about, and it would specify the time period for how long we could share information.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So there are a couple of exceptions that occasionally come up, and in those circumstances, we cannot protect the privacy of your information. And those are if we learn that you're at risk for harm, or somebody else is at risk for harm. For example, if we learned that you were suicidal and had a plan to kill yourself, we couldn't protect that information. We would have a duty to report it, and the reason that we would do that is because we have a higher obligation to try to protect your safety.
Okay, I understand.
Okay. So I always feel better if the client can just sort of repeat back to me what your understanding is of our confidentiality policy. So in your own words, can you just tell me how you understand it?
I understand your policy that you won't share my information with anyone else unless I give you permission, and that you will hold all my information confidential unless I plan to hurt myself or unless I plan to hurt other people.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you, Lucetta. Now we can get back to talking about what brings you in today. So tell me what your concerns are.
Okay, our next video is about client-centered practice.
Hi, I'm Jill Traeger from City College.
And I'm Tim Berthold, and we wanted to talk with you about some aspects of client-centered practice that we want to emphasize and that we want to see you become increasingly confident in demonstrating over the course of the semester and over the course of your certification.
The first one we want to talk about is one that I think in some ways is almost the opposite of our instincts a lot of the time. If I was with a friend, I might give them lots of advice about what they should do about any part of their life. I feel free to do it, and my friends hopefully listen to me. But with a client, you really want to allow them to come up with their own solutions. Advice giving is most certainly going to backfire if you try it. I don't know if you've had this experience as well, but I think that advice giving can end up being a point of actually resistance with a client rather than something that's welcome.
Yeah, and I always like to suggest that you reframe advice as a suggestion, and you do it rarely. But a resource that you identify as a CHW is not going to be as meaningful as a resource that the client comes up with herself and then acts on. The second issue that we want to talk about is meeting the client where they are, and while that sounds good and easy, it also means staying with the client when they're in an uncomfortable place, when they're talking with you about the death of a family member, when they're talking to you about maybe they're really sick with cancer and they're contemplating the end of their own life, maybe they're talking with you about childhood sexual abuse. Maybe they are filled with challenging emotions, sadness or fear, or anger. Unfortunately, these are the moments when we see providers sometimes want to change the subject and steer the conversation away to safer, maybe more neutral or less emotional topic. That really sends the wrong signal to the client. That's the moment to lean in. That's the moment to meet the client where they are and make space for their story and listen.
I really agree. I feel like those moments are the potentially transformative moments. So if we head in the other direction because of our own concerns, or even we might think if we're helping the client, we're missing a really important opportunity. The last thing that I want to mention is actually in some ways connected. It's what you do with your own feelings that might come up during a session. So if a client's talking about some of those difficult things, it could bring up your own memories about a traumatic experience, or they could be talking about something that you know you're absolutely opposed to in some way. There's any number of ways you might react. And what I like to suggest, and what I do myself, is acknowledge to myself that it's happening first. Because I think I get in trouble if I try to tell myself I just shouldn't feel something. No, I'm feeling it. I'm going to acknowledge it to myself, and then I'm going to put it in kind of a figurative box. I'm going to put it aside, but with the knowledge that I'm going to come back later and open up that box and take a look and figure out what's going on. And I might do that figurative opening of the box later with a supervisor. It might be with a colleague, or it might just be in my own journal. But whatever it is, it needs to be on my own time because it is not about the client. One temptation in those moments can be also to say to the client, oh, I know just what you're feeling, and then tell them why you're just feeling the same thing. It's not your time. That's not your time. So I think this idea of a box is helpful for me, but whatever works for you as a way to set aside what's going on for you, acknowledge it, and come back later to take a look.
Yeah. Own your own issues. Work on them. We've got to continue to do our own healing and recovery work in this profession, but not when you're working with the client. Pick them up and return to them later. Right?
Okay, so one last video today about developing referrals.
what we wanted to talk a little bit about was this, a little bit more about this whole issue of knowing and getting and making the right kind of referrals to resources to clients, which I know isn't always easy. When you first were hired as a community health worker at Transition, I think maybe Emily gave you sort of an outdated kind of binder of resources in the city for folks coming back to community from prison. Yeah. And tell me a little bit about what it was like to start your job with an outdated binder of resources.
You know, first I looked at it, I kind of like laughed, you know, and because Emily was like, I want you to hand this out, because I just started, and I probably hadn't been there even a good month. So she gave me the book, and she's like, oh, I want you to give this out to all the clients. So I look at the book, and I'm going through this book, and I'm like, half these programs don't exist, you know, and I'm thinking to myself, we giving clients this? Just wasn't a good fit for our clients. Yeah. You know, so it was just basically frustrate them even more. Yeah. So it's worse to give a bad referral than no referral at all. Yeah, yeah. You know, something a bad referral is worse than you just now would say, forget it, you know, I'll work on something. You know, but if you're gonna give them a bad referral, that might just set them back even more, because then, you know, they're already frustrated. So when you give them a referral to a place that might not even exist, staff is not that helpful, you know, that's gonna set them back from even more. Yeah. It's gonna really upset. Yeah. And I don't blame them.
They spend all their time, they take 2 buses across town, they show up and it's closed, or they show up and they don't meet the eligibility guidelines, so they're not eligible. Yeah. You know, I think these were sort of early days around resources specific to reentry. But what did you do with that binder? Did you throw it out, or did you just sort of start crossing out the ones that didn't exist? How did you start to create a viable list of resources for your clients?
Well, basically, I looked at it, and I said, well, you know, some of these are still around, some of them aren't. So I kind of like X'd out the ones that wasn't around, and I kind of like wanted to. And the ones that was still on there, I kind of like went to them, you know, introduced myself. You know, I wanted to check out the program. You know, I introduced myself, what my program was about, you know, who I help. You know, specifically, this is who I help. Yeah. You know, and if they didn't fit the, you know, requirements of who I was working with, I kind of like was left them off the list too. Yeah. I kind of like had like a system. You know, I put the stars on it, worked out perfect with every place that I went to. You know, they also need the same needs too. You know, they needed a place where they could send their clients that had medical needs. Yeah. So, you know, we worked hand in hand that way. I got on the bus and, you know, I would just go from place to place, neighborhood to neighborhood.
You really created your own guide.
Yeah.
Because one didn't exist.
Yeah.
When you started.
Yeah.
And I always think of those personal relationships, not just knowing the name of a good agency that has a program or a service that my client might benefit from, but knowing somebody who works there is maybe going to take my call. Have those personal relationships paid off for you and your clients?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because now we're like hooked up to every program that deals with reentry. You know, and we can make a phone call, and they're like, if they can do it, they'll do it. You know, and if they can't, you know, they'll give us a timeline when they can do it. But if the client needs something right then, we're on to another one.
Sometimes a referral is giving a client a safe place to go. Sometimes it's going there with them, yeah. And sometimes it sounds like it's bringing the services to them, like yeah. Bringing food to where they're staying.
You know, to me, a good referral is a place that you would go yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
so
the standard.
Yeah. If you wouldn't go there, why would you send your clients there? Yeah. You know.
So your clients are probably good sources too. They,
yeah.
They come back and say, yeah. That was thank you. That was a good place to send me, or I wouldn't send it anybody else there.
Yeah. You know, I've learned some of the best resources from our clients. Our clients come in and tell me things about some housing opportunities, that they just happen to stumble upon. Oh, these would be perfect, Ron. You know, they'll bring me the flyer and everything. You know, and they'll tell me, hey, you need to send them over here.
So that will conclude our videos for today. But the good thing about those videos is it really highlighted how we can build in confidentiality into our interviews. It talked about repeating back to our clients what we're hearing them say. I really liked this last video and how he talked about don't send someone to a place you wouldn't go to or haven't really verified. So when we're building these referral lists, just make sure they're accurate. And if you can, do some upfront legwork and go introduce yourself or give a phone call. Even an email introduction, letting people know that you're a local advocate for patients, you're reaching out, you'd like to know more about their services. Things are constantly changing, so it's something you'll probably have to plan on refreshing at least one time yearly, if not every 6 months. So hopefully you guys found that information useful and valuable, and you can incorporate that in your daily activities when you're meeting with clients. So some folks have gone ahead and already emailed me their client intake form. When we get this listserv jump-started tomorrow, we'll be sharing many more resources there. A great document Lorna shared with me last week, her referral list, and some of that stuff is stuff that can be transferred over into other communities. But then if folks want to share their referral list, it's great to bounce ideas off each other. It'll be a confidential place for us to share information and gather resources. So I'm really looking forward to this listserv for us and our work we're doing. So thank you guys for attending today's session, and I just wanted to give the last couple of minutes to see if there were questions. And yes, Lorna, do you have a question? Oh, let me take you off mute. Go ahead. You're off mute now.
I do, and it's regarding activity 9.1, because we're supposed to do skits with another individual for part of the homework. And so, I mean, I get that are we going to do that in class? Or do we have to find a victim and say, hey, I need you to do a skit with me?
We can do, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
We can do it in class. However, if you want to practice ahead with a colleague on that activity, that would be great too. And then we can come back as a bigger group and go over that experience. And you said that was activity 9.1?
Yeah, it says you have 15 minutes to prep for a 5-minute presentation, skit, client-centered counseling, skills that you selected, da-da-da. At RHS, I was a dysfunctional parent. You know, you play the different role plays so that you understand the humility of being the client and having to go see a person, and then the role play of being the person having to provide skills and being closed or opened and body language, or, you know, it's kind of, it's funny. It's fun to do. But, yeah, just so that you have the advantage of learning how to do that. And I was just like, how do you plan for us to turn this part in? Or it's just
go ahead and work on it at your organization, and then if you can, take useful notes from it and talk about your experience next time. Several of us do have webcams, so folks, next week, if you could use your webcam, I know some of us use it every time, but if you could use your webcam and then also dial into the phone line, we would love to do more with role-playing and some mock interviewing, as Lorna just detailed, is part of our next chapter's assignment. 9.1, I would love it if we could do some of that face-to-face stuff through the GOACH training. It's a great platform that allows us to do that. So I'll definitely reserve time next week well, wait a minute. Let's talk about next week. So next week is 4th of July. However, 4th of July falls on a Tuesday, so I will see if we're going to hold session. Are many of you going to be in the office next Monday working, or are you guys going to be off for the holiday? You can comment, or so everyone will be working or not. Okay, so I'll see, guys, if we're going to hold our session next Monday, and I will let you know for sure here by Wednesday if we're gonna have class. But the next time we meet, we're going to reserve about 20 to 30 minutes to do some role playing, and I would love for everyone to use their webcam if they have the capability, and also to call in to the phone line. So I've got you guys' chat logs of your schedules. Looks like about half of you are working and half of you might be out of the office enjoying the holiday. So we'll regroup again. And if you can't do webcam, that's fine. Just go ahead and call in and we can use your voice just as well. So our homework until we meet again will be Chapter 9. Focus on Activity 9.1 and role play with a colleague or a willing victim. And then we'll join again, if not on the 3rd of July, it will be on the 10th. And I might, if we're not going to meet on the 3rd, look at moving our webinar maybe to a different day. But I'll probably just know more once I talk to folks here at the PCA and see if we're open. So thanks everybody for all of your time today. Happy 4th of July. If I don't get in touch with you in advance. We're working on Chapter 9, and we will do more with client interviewing. So take care and have a great rest of your week, guys. We will have office hours this Thursday as well if you're struggling in anything and need help. So take care. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you. Happy 4th.